Hello, community, and I appreciate you tuning into the Only Women Entrepreneurs podcast. I'm your host, Rosemary Tuscolini, a former high school English teacher who transformed into a successful entrepreneur by pursuing a career in the field of manufacturing at Royal Door Limited. It's a family-owned and operated establishment since 1975. There, I helped to revolutionize the industry by designing and building custom wood doors for thousands of people all over, including celebrities, professional athletes. Our products are featured in HGTV real estate and home renovation shows, on Netflix series, on the covers of construction and renovation magazines. Now I run O, an initiative built to empower young women as they venture into the business world and alternative careers. Here, you'll learn about powerful women who have taken charge of their own lives, and you'll discover the invaluable insights and wisdoms they have to offer. I met our next guest through the Canadian Manufacturers and Exporters Association, where we are both members. Having her here today contributes to a very special episode of the O podcast. How so, you may ask? Well, our next guest is a proven testament that not only is age a number, and it's never too late to become an entrepreneur, but also an extraordinary example of success in a male-dominated industry. In fact, she worked 30 years as a chemical engineer in manufacturing. At the young age of 50, our guest started her own company, Rillea Technologies Inc., located in Ottawa, Canada. Who would be courageous enough to begin their entrepreneurial path in that stage of life? Well, her name is Lisa Hallsworth, and we're so fortunate to have her on today's show. Her journey resonates deeply with Only Women Entrepreneurs' values of empowerment, leadership, and personal growth. Let's welcome Lisa to the show and get right into exploring her path to entrepreneurship. Hello, Lisa.
Hi, Rosemary, and thanks for having me on today.
Oh, it's certainly our pleasure to be hosting you today. I know you're busy, like most female entrepreneurs, but it's great that we're able to carve out a little bit of time together. So I usually like to start my interviews with a little bit of background history. So can you take us into the past about your early days and how you grew up on the farm on the east coast of the country, and share how your engineering journey began? It's a very drastic change, and I'm sure the audience will like the story.
Yeah, so I grew up as you said, on a farm in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. It was really an idyllic childhood, lots of space, lots of places to explore, lots of freedom to explore. And I preferred, as a child, I preferred outside. So that meant that I spent a lot of time with my dad, and I was kind of his sidekick. And, at a young age, there's lots of things to do. A farm, it's never ending. Mm-hmm. So I was, helping with fences, helping with hay, helping with all kinds of chores. And eventually, when my legs got long enough, I got to drive the tractor, which was my personal favorite. But as I got older, our family was very traditional. So I knew that from a very young age, again, that the farm would be passed along to my older brother, as it had been 3 generations before. And so I was always encouraged to, by both parents, to get an education, especially by my mom. She was very adamant that I go out and have a good education and be able to support myself. And through high school, I did okay with math and physics. And my physics teacher said, you should try engineering. And I said, well, what is it? And he said, well, I don't really know what they do, but it's easier to find a job than, say, something like teaching, or with a science degree. So off I went. I was lucky enough to get accepted at St. Evax first, and that's in Antigonish, Nova Scotia. And in Nova Scotia, when you do an engineering degree, at that time, you did 2 years at a university. It was a very general diploma. And then you moved to the Technical University of Nova Scotia to finish. And when I was ready to change, I wanted to be able to work I wanted to do my schooling in a university that had co-op, so that I could pay my way through school. and the technical university only had co-op and civil. I wanted chemical, so I went off to Waterloo, and that brought me to Ontario, and still where I live today. And actually, I do live in Belleville, Ontario.
Yeah, beautiful part of the province. Mind you, Cape Breton is awesome as well, and people should go visit, and lots of history there. So that's really interesting how you got started. So going back to your farm experience, you mentioned that you would put up fences and you worked around the farm. So was farm work in your area predominantly a male represented? And how did you feel though growing up on the farm? Did you feel that you belonged there, or it was definitely a designation for males only?
No, it's definitely a male kind of oriented thing on a farm. It's mostly men, lots of heavy work. And I felt, of course, I had been there since I was very little, and I had complete trust in my dad and my brother and the men who were around. So I learned to work with men lots. And farming is an interesting thing because farmers always feel pressure when pressure from the weather to get the hay in on time. Pressure to get the seeds in, to be able to work the fields when it's dry enough, and so on. So when something breaks, farmers are really good at improvising, particularly like in a small town like Cape Breton or where I grew up in Cape Breton in those days. Couldn't just run to Home Depot and get a part, right? Yeah, so you had to improvise. True. And so I was often by my dad's side when he was fixing things or, figuring out a way to just make it work until he could get that job done. And then there was time afterwards to have it kind of fixed and repaired properly. So
yeah, farming, you're at the mercy of nature, the elements. And like you said, if you're in isolated locations, and you depend on equipment and all of a sudden something breaks down and you're, like you said, under pressure, I need to get the crop in before it rains. Yeah. So you have to rely on your skill. You're thinking out of the box, right? Your critical thinking skills are important. So I guess those are experiences that really prepared you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Just being able to, we did a lot of, it's amazing what you can do with baler twine. Yes. Yeah.
That's fantastic. So with a chemical engineer degree, what job opportunities are available for women in general? Like young ladies might be listening to the podcast and thinking about engineering. There's so many branches. What specifically can they look towards as future positions, if they're considering that avenue of chemical engineering?
Yeah, chemical engineering degree is so flexible. The job possibilities are endless. You can work in the cosmetics industry, nice. Solar, batteries, chemical manufacturing, as I did, software, sales. The job opportunities are really endless, I would say. And contrary to what many people think of as chemical engineers, we don't tinker with chemicals. That's like chemists do. What chemical engineers actually do is once a chemist has, developed or figured out a product, what we do is see if we can take that product from the bench to being able to manufacture it and supply it to a worldwide market. So we deal with, all the pipes and the equipment and the layout and the safety of people and the environment that are associated with taking that, experiment almost or that initial product and being able to manufacture it at scale.
Yeah, it's incredible responsibility because even though a chemist is in a lab and they have an idea, they have a formula, but until it gets into your hands, you've got the responsibility of making sure it's environmentally safe, if it's for human consumption, that it doesn't harm our health. That is an incredible responsibility and role, and very important, as you stated.
Yes, that comes with lots of liability and it's and lots of ethical responsibility.
That sounds like it. And do you happen to know perhaps the range in pay when you're starting out as a new graduate to someone that is at senior level, 20 or 30 years down the road in their career?
Yeah, so an engineer today, a chemical engineer today, would likely start at $70,000 to $80,000,
Mm-hmm.
and then really the sky's the limit. So it depends. The thing that engineering gets you when you're in university, you do a lot of problem solving,
Mm-hmm.
and problem solving is a skill that you need in any career.
So much
So
so.
engineers, some will stay in the technical field,
Mm-hmm.
while others will move up to a managerial role, and then you often see engineers in the C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
So really, it's what do you want? Engineering gives you a great base to stay technical, or basically do whatever you would like to do.
Yeah, and then for some young ladies, anything under that falls under STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, they kind of like freeze and they say, "Oh, I'm not really good at math or science, so I would like to be a chemical engineer." So, what are your chances are becoming a chemical engineer if you don't really have that confidence? Like, what help or assistance can a potential young woman have out there to see her dream through?
Yeah, I think there's lots of mentorships now in available in through universities,
Mm-hmm.
and certainly finding that support network, and just finding people who will support you to just keep going. Like, I can remember failing a midterm and thinking, "Oh man, I'm done. I can't do this." But then you talk to everyone else, and pretty much the whole class has failed the midterm, and you think,
Yeah.
"Okay, well." I'm not the
It's
only one, so let's just see where this goes. and
exactly.
and my parents were really supportive. They were always like, they said, "You don't have to do this, you can always come back and live with us if you want, but
Mm-hmm.
really, I think you're bright, and you can do it if you want to. So, hey, don't put too much pressure on yourself, just keep taking that next step forward." And I think that was really helpful. So, there's lots of tutors that you can access in university and so on, and they can help you um, just get through some of those sticking points that may be challenging at first.
That's very encouraging that to know help is available. All you have
Yeah.
to do is search and look for it, and somebody will, if you require a mentor, if it may be a tutor or someone, will help you through to get over the obstacles that you're facing. My experience with engineering is I dated a fellow years ago, and he was in the engineering program at University of Toronto. And he said, "Why don't you just come to one of my lectures?" Right. And I said, "Okay." So I walked in there. It was a pretty big lecture hall, and I looked around and I counted the number of women that were there, and the number were, it was 10.
Yeah.
And then I asked my boyfriend at the time, I said, "So are these students?" And he said, "Only two are students. The other ones are like you, girlfriends." So that really intimidated me. I go, "Wow, so yeah, engineering is definitely male dominated." So from that experience of many decades ago, how is it today? Is it more balanced? Is there more representation for women in the engineering programs overall?
Yes, I think it is more balanced. I mean, I think it's still male dominated, and
Mm-hmm.
chemical is had more women. So I think I had maybe 25% of my class at the time. So I graduated in the excuse me, in the late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So about 25% of the class were women, and now I think it's in chemicals probably closer to 50. And I
That's
think
incredible.
civil
Nice.
civil is also, there's still some disciplines that have lower numbers
Representation.
of
Yeah.
women, but
Well,
definitely
we're
better
getting there.
overall.
That's the whole point
Yeah,
of the podcast, right? Now, we
that's right.
need to feature you successful women like you that have carved out a career, and hopefully it will lead to other young women considering those options. So, Now,
Sure.
in the interview, I want to focus a little bit on your early work experiences prior to you opening up your company. So, you worked 30 years as a chemical engineer in manufacturing. Would you mind sharing like where you worked and what role you played in each of your employment opportunities?
Yeah, sure. So I started out in as a process engineer in a refinery. So my job was essentially optimize the equipment that makes everyday products like propane, gasoline, asphalt, wax, things like that. And my role was just to try to get that equipment working at peak operating as at peak performance.
Mm-hmm.
And then I spent 3 years in refining, and then I moved on to as a contractor, chemical safety engineer in the chemical industry. So I worked with mostly DuPont and through a lot of contracting consulting firms. And I spent over 23 years in that role. And again, we were making things like fabric for airbags, refrigerants, paints, clothing like Lycra. And my role was chemical safety. So both to ensure the safe design of the processing equipment and also leading what the industry calls process hazards analysis. So that's a really involved process. It can take 6 months to a year to do. But basically, it's a big team that comes together. So the operations team and the maintenance team, the engineering team, leadership, safety, and industrial hygiene, and so on. And we look at the design of the equipment to assess what's changed. This is equipment that is involved in high hazard processes.
Right.
So we look at what's changed, where there might be unintended consequences, and it's really an involved process to try to root out any potential hazard before it happens and then, address it. It's super interesting, and you get to hear, it's a multidisciplinary team. You get to hear from all different types of people who are working on these products and hear their experiences. So I really enjoyed that.
That's fantastic. It sounds like every little section or role that you had to perform at these companies are critical for our society to carry on and the betterment of society as a whole.
Absolutely. I mean, if you think about the jobs that chemicals do in our society, and you think about how important they are in safe water,
Mm-hmm.
sterilization for hospitals, just in automotive, like some of the work that chemicals do, instead of, you can imagine it would be very hands-on, like a person would have to clean brakes, and that comes with all kinds of other potential issues, repetitive strain issues, and so on. Whereas if you can spray a chemical on it, and it can dissolve the product, and then you're wiping it clean. Right. So the really chemicals are really important to our lives as we know them today, and I'm definitely pro chemical. Just use them safely.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, because when you talk to just a person in the general population and you talk about chemicals, everyone has that negative view about them. Like, you always have the big chemical giants that are spewing waste into our lakes. We might have oil spills. We might have environmental damage. And we never hear the positive aspects that chemicals play into our lives. And I'm glad you shared that, because it really changed my outlook and perspective about the importance and the good that they serve to humanity in general.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we don't think, one of the things that shocked me when I started Rillea Technologies was seeing products that people just flush down the toilet. Things like sulfuric acid, where, for me, we had to report every liter of, if there was a spill that was a liter, we had to report that, and that had all kinds of paperwork associated with it. And well, it should. we need to be responsible for things like that. But
Absolutely.
when in my work today, I see that sulfuric acid is sold in liter bottles in a department store as a drain opener, and people pour it by the liter down their drains to open their drains. Very hazardous.
It is.
Product. And it's, so when we think of polluting the lakes and water systems, we need to think about what we're doing as individuals, not just what big chemical companies are doing.
And that's a great example, because I'm just thinking of using those local chemicals that are available, like liquid plumber or Drano.
Mm-hmm.
It's sold in your grocery store,
Yep.
and you think in your head, oh, it's fine, it's legit. And what you just told me completely shocked me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, some of the products are less hazardous than others. The product that I was talking about is it's sold as a drain opener.
Mm-hmm.
I'm kind of shocked because it's an acid, and Drano tends to be a base product. So if you remember your high school chemistry,
Mm-hmm.
mixing an acid and a base is a really bad thing. You release toxic gas. And so, we often see that people will try Drano, something like a product like Drano, and it doesn't work. And then they'll get another product like this drain opener and try that. And all of a sudden you've got chlorine gas or toxic gas coming out of your sink, which can be, it's caused a lot of problems for our clients. It can cause a building to be evacuated. And these are just products that you buy for the same purpose at the department store. So, it's these kinds of things that make me so passionate about what we do, of just trying to raise that awareness of, the hazards that can be associated with chemical products.
So you got me concerned here. Just an average homeowner, next time I have a clogged sink or I have issues. So how do you recommend calling
Often you can
calling a plumber and snaking it, or
I mean, I just use a little, you can buy a little snake, and I just use that myself and clean it out. Or there's always just a little trap at the bottom. You can unscrew that and empty out. It's often, a pile of whatever, soap and hair and so on. It's kind of gross.
Well, that's what gloves are for, right?
But it's safer than just pouring
advice.
something
Good
that you
know.
don't know.
Yeah.
And especially if you're a worker, like if you're going into apartment buildings and you don't know what people have put down that sink before, some chemical, right?
So
it might be there might be pharmaceuticals in there. You never know what it is. So you have to be very cautious. Yeah.
I appreciate that advice, and I hope our listeners paid attention to that piece, because that is definitely a good nugget to take away for future use. So you worked all these years at various companies. So what happened in your life? Because you've got a secure job. You probably were well paid.
Yes.
You didn't have to really worry about anything. You just go in, you went to a job that you were passionate about, and out of the blue, you said, I'm going to start Rillea Technologies. How did that come about?
Well, one of my projects with one of our clients was to design a flammables, it's called the Class 1 flammable storage area. And it's essentially, there are explosion panels and all kinds of really fancy ventilation. And the floor has to be non-sparking, and the lights have to be special, and everything in the room. This room is special to basically house these highly flammable and potentially explosive products. And so I was once it was finished, we invited the fire department, the local fire department, who would respond to an incident. We invited them to our site to show them all what would happen if there was an incident involving this room, because it had 4-hour firewalls and so on. And where could they, see what was happening inside, so that they were protected and they understood, how to assess the situation. and pre-plan basically. And, when I was talking to the firefighters, he said, we don't get this kind of information for industrial locations. We are just coming in and, we know that there's some chemicals on site, but we don't get any pre-planned information about what types of chemicals. So, and the one thing that I didn't understand about firefighters is that they don't have the right to refuse work. So if the incident commander thinks that it's safe for them to enter the house or enter the building, they have to go in. They can't say, no, I feel it's unsafe. So I really felt like, wow, these people who put their lives on the line for us don't have the right information to kind of assess the situation and protect themselves. And so that was the first grain of, okay, I need to do something about this with some of the knowledge we have. And with software, as software was evolving, when you're doing repetitive tasks that are repetitive, that software is a great solution for that. You need a human to evaluate the actual risk of a chemical or a group of chemicals.
Right.
But getting the right information to be able to understand that you need to evaluate the risk can be done through software. And so I just saw this opportunity, and at the same time, another colleague said, why don't you try? And I've got somebody that I know who's a software developer. Let's try. So yeah, it just came at a good time. My kids had gone off to university. They were independent, and thought I needed something new. And so I did it. And then I quickly understood that, all employers have this issue. I mean, for you and with manufacturing doors, you probably manage 100 to 200 documents. It's very difficult to read through all that technical information if you don't have someone who really understands it.
That had me thinking to one particular incident. I don't know if that would have prevented it years ago in the Downsview area. There was a propane explosion, Sunrise Propane. And that was really bad. Is that something that your company could have prevented with the use of your software, or?
And so propane, because there are regulations that, are in place in terms of how to store propane, various propane cylinders. So our software wouldn't help with that. It just identifies that there's propane on site. But I mean, the fire department would know that just by the signs on the doors and so on. Our software helps more when there are lots of chemicals on a site that are really difficult to assess, because there's over 200 million chemical ingredients in the world registered today. And they can be made into just an infinite number of products. So no one could just know, what the hazards of this or that chemical product is.
Okay.
Propane is kind of a known hazard. So, yeah.
So you're looking more at, say, an industrial plant that, say it's a furniture company, and they produce the raw product, but they also finish it. They have paints and varnish and adhesives. So you would be able to help those type of clients.
That's right.
With your company.
Yes. So lots of people don't think, like when they think about chemical hazards, they think about, big chemical companies and what's in the lines, but they don't think about the things that are intended to be released to the environment. Like when you're using paints, right? All the liquids drying off and the color is staying on the wall. So that what's drying is going somewhere. And when you're spraying, like even disinfectant, that is drying and ending up in your air. So they really don't think about the air quality associated with, chemicals that are released to the environment. And there are, things like glues and adhesives and bonding products that have very they have isocyanates that can, you know, give people or trigger asthma in people. Mm-hmm. And with just one exposure, and then people can become very sensitive to them, and that can make their life very difficult. So yeah, people don't often think, what they say to me is, well, if it was that dangerous, Health Canada wouldn't allow it to be on the market.
But they do.
Well, but Health Canada requires the supplier to provide a safety data sheet, these documents that our software reads. And that is the official communication between, the supplier and the buyer about what the hazards of the product are. Often people don't read those documents. And that's what our software reads the documents and summarizes and prioritizes the hazards. So you maybe won't realize, okay, it's an that product contains an isocyanate. Our software will flag that for you and turn it red and say, you need to do a risk assessment basically on this product depending on how you use it in your workplace.
You know what? You really touched a nerve with that, because one of the biggest challenges that we face in our company in manufacturing is we go through quality testing, and they go through the highest environmental standards. So it makes the product more expensive. Mm-hmm. So if you named a big box store, and you'll have a product that has come in from another country, and you have my product side by side,
yes,
you will see the imported product that is a third of the price of what I can sell it for. Mm-hmm. And when I try to explain to people that the product you're getting is cheaper because the materials are not necessarily environmentally friendly. Mm-hmm. Because, for example, we use recycled particle board, MDF for short, in our type of wood. It follows all of California's stringent standards, where are one of the highest in the world for environmental safety for human consumption. Mm-hmm. So it's not to say that formaldehyde, which is one of the key components in MDF, it doesn't say that we don't have it, but it's a considerably less risk than the products that are coming overseas. Mm-hmm. So what we're finding is, like you said, illnesses. Yes. People, mild asthma, worst throat and brain cancers.
Yes.
That could happen if you have unacceptable chemical levels in products that you're saying. Mm-hmm. So hence you have the cheaper price tag. And this is so important that consumers understand what they are bringing into their home. Like mm-hmm. if something as simple as, pouring a liquid to unclog your drain could have harmful health effects, then whether you're doing renovations and you're just putting a coat of paint, putting new floors or doors, if you go, oh wow, I just got a sweet deal, it's so cheap, but you're jeopardizing your health. It's actually a silent killer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, your indoor air quality is so important, and I think we all became maybe more aware of that during COVID. I got myself. I got a little CO2 meter for my house, and I was pretty shocked at how poor our ventilation was through the winter. Because in the summer we have the door windows open all the time, but in the winter, when the heat's on, you don't get a lot of fresh air coming into your house. And so the products that you choose, the paints that you choose to use, the products that you choose to buy do have an impact on your air quality where you spend, in your house where you spend a very large amount of time.
Precisely.
So I congratulate you for sticking with it and using those high quality products, because mm-hmm. I think that will pay off. And we're seeing that with even Patagonia had a recent announcement. Patagonia has a huge following, even though those products are expensive. Mm-hmm. But
there's a reason for it.
Yeah, they
right?
have a
And
strong mission and very successful.
that's good. I'm glad that we got that message out. That's so important. So I want to just circle back to your past work experiences with your employers. Did you have any barriers as a female in chemical engineering? And if so, can you just give us a little rundown on how that went about and how you reacted to each situation?
Yeah, so for sure. I mean, one of my biggest barriers, I would say, was, just speaking my mind and speaking up, public speaking.
Mm-hmm.
The farm was great for learning to work with men, but you're never giving them a presentation.
That's true.
And imposter syndrome for sure.
Yes.
And so I really tried to overcome that through a lot of my volunteer activities. So really just trying to put myself in a position in a volunteer activity where I was speaking in front of committees or speaking, in front of for organizations. And that really helped to just get a little bit more comfortable in speaking. Other obstacles, people assume initially that you're not capable. So really making sure that my work was, I put a lot of work, detail in my work. It was high quality, and making sure that I clarified the ask. So sometimes if someone asked me to do something, I would repeat it back to them with my sort of spin on it. And sometimes I would even send it in an email just to make sure this is what I understand you are asking from me. And then work to those deliverables. Okay. So that it was clear. I mean, I ran into some difficult behavior in terms of, in the early days in the refinery, there were lots of photos of naked women in the workplace, poor jokes, come-ons, threat, disrespectful behavior. But for the most part, I just ignored this unless I felt it was a personal threat or it might be a threat to a colleague. And then I engaged with a supervisor.
It's important to illustrate that whatever industry you are in, though those types of behaviors are evident, and you need to approach them and that rectify them. Like in my situation, when I first started, I started in the production area, which was primarily men. And it's like you said, wherever you went, you had calendars of pretty young women. Yeah. And you it was very uncomfortable. So the way I approached it was I bought a calendar from our local firefighters, and they were raising money. So I put it right beside the one with the female. And one of them looked at me and then said, well, why'd you put it up there? And I said, well, if you could have yours, I could have mine. And they said, well, that makes me feel uncomfortable. I said, okay. So how do you think I feel with that? All the calendars came down.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
You need to illustrate that, you know what, this is not making me comfortable.
Yes.
Like, I respect you as my teammate, and we're here to do a job, but don't disrespect me.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I had a very similar situation where I had worked with a colleague for many years, and his office was in the back. So we never went to his office. We always met in the processing area. And one day I ended up in his office, and he had postcards of very scantily clad women on his bulletin board. And I said to him, I knew him so well, and I was so surprised because he worked with a lot of women and he was wonderful.
He didn't fit the stereotype.
No, he didn't. And I said to him, like, how do you get away with that in this work environment? And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, and he said, does it make you feel uncomfortable? And I said, yeah. If I didn't know you and I came into this office for the first time, I would automatically assume, certain things about you in terms of, whether I could trust. And he said, interesting. And he took it down because he really just hadn't thought about it.
Well, he was oblivious.
Yeah.
Until someone pointed it out. And I don't think they intend for it to be malicious.
Yeah.
But until, like you said, you were a trusted individual, he took your advice seriously. And
Yeah.
I guess he didn't really understand how, of an embarrassment or degradation
Yeah.
of women in
Yeah.
general.
Yes.
That's
That's
great. That's a super example. So, going on to other aspects of your career, what were some of the pros and cons overall in your 30-year period, both as an employee and self employed?
Yeah. So, in terms of pros, I would say that the work in chemical engineering was challenging. It was interesting. I was continuously learning. You are pushed, because you're building products for world market. You're continuously pushed to learn about new technology and so on. I was able to take work part time when my kids were little. Um, so that, I really appreciated, and enabling some solutions to some of the world's largest problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like we can focus on large chemical companies and the problems they cause, but the number of solutions is crazy, right? The number of products that come out of companies like this is just unbelievable. Useful products, worthy products, and so I found that very purposeful.
Nice.
Um, the cons, it's high risk, sometimes really frightening. I can remember being under an oil refinery, being under a big furnace, and a couple of months earlier, the similar person who was doing my job had experienced an explosion. Two people died in that
Oh,
explosion.
that's horrific.
And the person who had my job had burns to 76% of his body.
Oh, wow.
And I was shaking in my boots
That's awful.
doing this job, because we had taken apart and analyzed the whole incident and tried to learn from it, but I was still nervous
Mm-hmm.
doing that job. And
I
yeah,
think anybody would be.
yeah, so it could be pretty frightening. The liability associated with professional engineering work is significant. I mean, it's low risk that we put so much energy and effort into trying to ensure that nothing bad happens. It is low risk, but still it can happen, and then it's a legal issue.
Of course.
The equipment's very male centric. So when I started in the refinery, there were no female washrooms. We had to go through the male change room to get PPE.
And
So
that's a
that was,
problem that still exists in some industries, and we're trying to correct
yes,
that.
yeah,
Unfortunately, in this day and age, it's unbelievable.
yes, yeah, exactly. And so PPE is made for men, and so you're taping your cuffs of your coveralls and so on. Gloves are too big, but yeah, and it could be a psychologically challenging environment. So you really did need to kind of oversee your mental health.
Those are very, very strong challenges and that you had to overcome. But your journey is definitely a testament to resilience. It's incredible how you've been able to navigate through the roughy and choppy waters to get to the point where you are at now. So thinking back, if you were 20 years of age, would you just take the same career path that you took, or would you do something a little differently?
That's a really tough question, and I think my answer would be different depending on what age
At
you asked
stage.
me, right? But
That's
I
so
think
true.
today, I would say that, with the benefit of 30 years of hindsight, absolutely, I would take the same path. I found my career very fulfilling, with lots of opportunities, lots of flexibility. When I was young, I had financial footing. I had time to enjoy my young family, my
Mm-hmm.
life.
Nice.
I was given the opportunity to hone my skills with any training that I felt I needed. I had great mentors. And what was, really important was I got to see what good looked like. Like I worked for companies who had invested decades, and in the case of DuPont, centuries in working and building processes and refining their processes. And so I think it was really beneficial for me to see what standard my software would have to meet if it was going to be used in large companies like that. And I think that was a priceless education.
Just listening to your story, all I'm imagining is just empowering leadership. That's what I'm labeling you as. So through your years of experience, you built effective teams, you inspired leadership, and those are remarkable feats. So could you share your approach to cultivating leadership qualities in others and how this aligns with O's mission of empowering and equipping aspiring female entrepreneurs with the necessary tools for success?
Yeah, so I think with teams, it's really important to have what I call communication saturation. So the best teams will work when everybody kind of understands what everybody's role is and where we all are on the journey, and especially agile teams. So things can change very quickly. It's important that you don't have to, play the telephone game, right?
Yes.
So my rule of thumb is make sure that your teams are small. So 7 plus or minus 2, err on the side of small. So 5 is kind of a great size for a team. And that way when you're sharing, you're trying to communicate among team members, it's easier. And no one feels like they got left out. And then respect, throwing out ideas. What you want for agile teams is that kind of idea farm, right?
Yes.
People feeling comfortable to throw out their ideas. And so when you're throwing out ideas, yes, and is a great response. Because even if the idea is implausible, the discussion will eventually come around to, well, that wouldn't really work, would it? Right? But if you say, no, that would never work, and you shut down the discussion, then you miss like some of the other bits and pieces that might have come out in that discussion, in that just brainstorming session where you're, right, just building on each other's ideas and really like getting people to think outside the box.
Okay, those are great responses. So I want to focus on some entrepreneurial lessons. Like, entrepreneurship is a journey of continuous learning. Every industry is always changing, and you got to stay on top of those things. So what's an essential lesson you've learned from your experiences that you believe would benefit aspiring entrepreneurs in general?
It's a tough go and entrepreneurship, but what I would say is to try to build your sort of minimum viable product as fast as you can, and find customers as fast as you can. So you don't have a business unless customers are willing to buy your product. That's a hobby, otherwise, right? So really, it's hard to compete. You have to have a little bit of a barrier to market. So look at what your expertise is. And even though it might seem easy to you, it may seem easy to you because you have that expertise. And so you can build a product with that expertise. It may be harder for others who don't have the expertise. But yeah, what I would say is the faster you can get people to pay for your product, the faster you'll know that you're on the right track. Right.
That's great. That's very, very much true, right? You have to pay the bills, especially if you quit your full-time job and you're just relying on your business for the sole income. It becomes an imperative.
Yes.
So further on the discussion of challenges, we know every business has to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. So at O, we're all about women tapping into their potential and overcoming obstacles. Presently, you do provide mentorship to several women for free, and I have to thank you for that. That is incredible, giving back. How do you inspire them to embrace challenges and view them as opportunities for growth?
So I love meeting with my mentees. I always learn so much from them. They're brilliant young women. So it's always fun. The most common trait that I see in them is imposter syndrome and lack of confidence, even though they're unbelievably accomplished. And so I try to help them reframe their doubts through my eyes, right? So just let's look at what you have achieved. Like, this is not everyone, right? And just see their accomplishments, because sometimes you just sweep those, been there, done that, no big deal. But it is a big deal, and I find that this often helps. And then if we're looking at work that they're trying to, entrepreneurship that they're jumping into, or a job that they're interested in, we'll do some mock interviews with them, and then give them some feedback and kind of get them to maybe again draw on what I see as benefits that maybe an employer would want to hear more about, that they may have not realized, or that would be an important piece of the discussion.
That's great. So your approach to business in general, I'm seeing a person that espouses empowerment, leadership, and it's really exhilarating to see. So how do you believe these qualities can create a ripple effect of positive change in the business world?
Yeah, so I think most people can feel when they know what good looks like. And if people have autonomy to decide, or autonomy to in their own work, they'll adopt ideas that make sense and that advance their own goals, especially, like, most people have positive goals. So they'll even share their experiences with others, right? If they had a really good, if they're really excited about something. So I think in this way that we can see positive change in the world. And for me, I love it when our customers come to us and say, we've eliminated these hazardous products because we didn't really understand the extent of the risk, and they're now gone from our workplace. Or they've used our software to find a safer alternative for the product. That makes me feel awesome. It makes them feel awesome. They teach their employees, more about those kinds of situations and information. So those people can take it home and teach it to their kids. They might talk about it to their community. So I think if we can, positivity in that way, or positive outcomes, are contagious. And yeah, we often see that with, entrepreneurial innovation centers, where you get entrepreneurs all together, and all of a sudden people are realizing, hey, I can do that. I can start a business. That person started a business. I can do one. And, and then they start to work together to build businesses, solve problems, and it becomes contagious.
And I'm glad you touched upon the entrepreneurial mindset. Now, not all of us have that at the beginning of our journeys. And mindset is a really important factor in entrepreneurship in general. How would you guide our audience to develop a resilient and growth-oriented mindset, both personally and professionally?
So I think one of the things that's really good to keep in mind, and one of the biggest learnings that I had to face, I think, was that when people hear about something new, whether that's an idea or a product, it takes them 7 to 14 times before they will adopt it.
That's true.
So just because you haven't actually convinced somebody to buy your product doesn't mean they'll never buy it. It just means that you haven't resolved all of their doubts yet. So in the same way, I would encourage your listeners to be patient with themselves and be patient with their ideas. And don't, like, if somebody says, oh, that'll never work, don't then shut down. Continue to maybe try a different audience, or rephrase it again in a different way. Because if you think about just how you purchased something, right, you might become first aware through an ad, and you dismiss it. And next you hear about it from a friend, and then you give it more consideration. Then you look it up, then you learn some more. Then you might try it. And then you assess like whether it's right for you. So each of those steps is learning. But the important thing was to be open to the idea, open to the product, open to something new. And so I think that's something that for personal growth, for resilience, just to be open to, ideas and the fact that it can take quite some time to adopt new ideas.
Yeah, I love that. That was a great, great piece of advice. So, looking forward, what legacy do you aim to leave behind through your company, Rillea Technologies Inc?
This is always a tough one, and
I know it is.
I hope we leave a positive one for sure. But people ask me this all the time because they, what do I want from Rillea? But I think, when you start a business, it's like having a child. And you would never say, oh, my child's going to be a doctor or a lawyer or so-and-so when they grow up. You nurture them as they grow, and you try to see, what's out there and what their interests are, and mesh them together and, encourage them down a path. And running a business isn't that much different than, having a child. So I definitely,
great analogy.
yeah, I definitely want to, really to inspire a change in the way that people think about chemical safety, a positive one, and not in an anti-chemical way. I think just like chemicals are great tools. Let's use them safely, just like any other tool. Use them with PPE, use them with ventilation, and I think eventually that chemical safety needs to be as easy as checking the weather or the score of the hockey game. So I really envision a time where you will say to Google or Siri or Alexa, hey, I'm working in this area today. What chemical hazards do I need to be aware of? I'm pregnant. And it will say, you should not work in this area, or you need to be aware that these products are being used, but they're used, whatever. It'll tell you what you need to be aware of. And I think that our software and with its data collection is, the first steps to getting there. So I really would like to inspire that in our competitors and inspire that in our own business to push to that vision to make chemical safety so easy that everybody just understands. They don't have to read these long technical documents.
So in other words, like your slogan says, make chemical safety a snap.
Right.
Something that's very easy. Don't have to stress about it. It's readily available. And that is a really profound legacy. And I hope all the best you reaching that, because as society as a whole will benefit from your efforts. And I thank you very much, Lisa. So as we're bringing the interview to a close, for our community of listeners who want to connect with you, learn about your products, where can they find you?
Well, our website is sdsriskassist.ca. That's sdsriskassist.ca. And we're active on LinkedIn and Twitter or X. So you can find us under the handle SDS Risk Assist. And we also post occasionally on Facebook and Instagram under the same handle.
Oh, fantastic. So thank you everyone for listening to this awesome episode of the Only Women Entrepreneurs podcast. If you want to learn more about us and our free resources created for women, by women, visit our website, onlywomenentrepreneurs.com. There you'll find tailored content designed to empower women to navigate the complexities of the business landscape, including personal development and business courses crafted to accompany you on your journey of discovery. Book a free career consultation with me today. Stay connected with us on social at Only Women Entrepreneurs to engage with a network of empowered women changing industries. We're dedicated to providing you with the tools, resources, inspiration to realize your fullest potential. Hit subscribe to be notified when our next episode drops, and leave me some comments on what you would like to hear in the future podcast. Thank you so much, Lisa, for joining us, and everyone tuning in.
Thank you for the opportunity. Really appreciate it. And to all the women out there, you go girl.
Thanks again. Take care.